Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Regina Minudri. I'm the acting city librarian for the city of San Francisco, and I'm happy to be here tonight with you. The purpose of tonight's program is to demystify, if you will, the process that the library uses to select material, to maintain our collection, and to evaluate our collections. And we have three very wonderful staff members who have agreed to speak this evening. And after I finish my brief remarks, we're going to show you a little video called Collection Management at the Library, which will kind of show you the process a book goes through from the time we buy it till the time it gets out for the public to read. A couple of statistics for you, because I like statistics. As of June 30th this year, the library had over 500,000 registered borrowers. 91,000 of those were children between the ages of 0 and 14. Our budget was approximately $39 million in change. I wish I had that level of change. Last year, we added cataloged books, total number of books, 176,000. That consisted of about almost 30,000 titles, but 176,000 actual volumes. As of June 30th, this library held almost 2.4 million volumes, about 5 million government documents, about 4.6 million microforms, and 114,000 audio materials, 33,000 videos, and almost 11,000 current periodical subscriptions. So this is not a small operation by any means. Attendance in the library last year, this is the main library and all 26 of our branch libraries, was 6.1 million people came into and or visited a public library in the city of San Francisco. We answered and or responded to 2.3 million questions in that year. Now, I would not like to be asked 2.3 million questions, but our reference staff at the main library and the branches were able to handle that level of questions to a fairly high satisfaction level as well. We circulated approximately 1.4 million children's items, with a total circulation of 5.5 million items. Now, if you go back there and you figure out we have 503,000 registered borrowers, and we loaned out about 5.5 million items, that means all of these registered borrowers checked out about 10 books a year, which is pretty good. I know I read 10 books a year, but of course we're different. We're supposed to read every day. And I do. My favorite place to read right now is on the BART train coming back and forth to work. It is my best solo time. And I just finished a novel this afternoon as I was coming in on BART. This library serves not only the city of San Francisco, but the Bay Area, because we are a resource for the Bay Area. We're one of the largest collections in the Bay Area, certainly the largest public library collection in the Bay Area, and we're very proud of our collections. We're proud of our collections. We're proud of our special collections. We have many special collections that are not in this library, but they're in our branch libraries, at the Chinatown branch, at the Richmond branch, at the Excelsior branch, at West Portal. Even at Ocean View, we have special material, our smallest library. So every one of our libraries, one of the things we work very hard to do as we select material for the public is to select material that reflects our community, that expands our community, and that gives our community a chance to grow and learn and develop. So not only are we buying things that people come in and say, I want to read the latest Danielle Steele novel. Of course we're going to buy the latest Danielle Steele novel, but we'll also buy that first novel by an unknown author that has had excellent reviews somewhere. Maybe not as many copies as Danielle Steele, but we will buy it. We will also buy materials of special interest to our local history collections. of special interest to our neighborhoods. As a native San Franciscan, I understand the importance of neighborhoods in San Francisco, and I applaud them. They're all so very different. And as I have visited every branch library over the last 4 months, I have seen how different our neighborhoods are and how very much they identify a certain kind of life, a certain kind of clientele, and a certain kind of community. And our branch librarians work very hard at understanding what it is the people that use our library want and need. And tonight you're going to hear from some of them. But before we do that, we have a video that we'd like to show you called Collection Management at the Public Library. So let's go to the video. The San Francisco Public Library serves many audiences and is prepared to serve all San Franciscans. Children, teenagers, job seekers, business people, people from many countries and cultures, people with disabilities, people who enjoy reading, people who are curious about the world around them, people who are learning, either in school or on their own. We try to provide the things that people want. Books of all kinds, paperbacks, videos, compact discs, magazines, newspapers, current issues of papers from many cities, and older issues of newspapers on microfilm, and do-it-yourself materials on law, medicine, and finance. The library collects and makes available materials in many formats to respond to the many needs of the people in our community, both needs that are expressed and needs that we anticipate. We try to keep a step ahead of what people ask for. We read reviews, listen to talk shows, check updating services that tell us when authors will be making appearances. We keep track of the bestseller lists and even predict what new books are likely to appear on them. We make a special effort to learn about the publications of local writers before they're published. We visit bookstores and watch for what's popular. We monitor what our patrons ask for and give each request serious consideration. We constantly watch for gaps and holes in the collections and make efforts to fill them. Our librarians each have a responsibility to select books and other things for some part of the library's collection. The staff at each branch library and in each main library department make selection decisions for the part of the collection they are assigned to manage. Some librarians select books for a branch adult or children's collection. Other librarians select books for a part of the main library's collection. Librarians at the main library address citywide needs, while librarians at branch libraries emphasize responding to community needs within the neighborhoods their branch serves. In all, close to 200 librarians participate in the process of selecting and managing the library's collections. This is a collaborative process. Different groups of librarians meet regularly to discuss which materials to add. Children's librarians read and review children's literature. Adult services librarians review titles to add to the adult collection. Groups of librarians also prepare lists of books to replace and update the existing collections. The library's collection development plan is used as a guide to what to add or replace. The plan describes the library's overall goals in developing its collections. It also gives specific guidance on developing the various parts of the overall collection. The plan contains goals. In some cases, there is a gap between the goal and the existing collection, and the goal needs increased funding to become reality. The plan can supply information needed to develop grant requests to fund these goals. Every year, the city gives the library an amount of money out of the city's general fund to support its collections. Over the years, that amount has gone up and down. At the same time, book prices always seem to go in one direction, up. Over the years, the library's ability to purchase new titles and replace older titles has fluctuated along with this rise and fall. In 1994, San Franciscans passed Proposition E. This measure doubled the library's budget and enabled the city to increase dramatically the budget for materials. The annual amount continues to vary, however, since the amount received depends on the level of property taxes collected. Nonetheless, the library's materials budget has increased substantially since 1994, allowing us to purchase many more of the things people want to read. Here's a typical situation that helps show how the process works. A library patron has read reviews in the Sunday newspaper of some new books he would like to read. He brings the reviews into the library to see if he can get them there. A library staff member looks the books up in the library's online catalog. One of the items is listed on order, MSL 1197. That means the book is already on order from the monthly selection list of November 1997. The librarian can help the patron reserve the book. He will be notified when it arrives and is available for borrowing. The other book does not appear on the online catalog. It is not yet on order. The patron is referred to a librarian who makes a note of the review and checks to see the status of the book. If the patron wishes, he can turn in a suggestion card for the book. When possible, the library tries to order books that are suggested if they fall within the collection development plan guidelines. Books are ordered on a regular basis by the library's acquisitions department. They are received, often in large shipments, in the receiving unit, where they're unpacked and checked against the order slips. Often, the library buys numerous copies of popular and important titles, so that copies of a book may be placed in branch libraries throughout the city. It is not unusual for 15 or 20 copies of a high-demand title to be purchased. Sometimes, particularly in the main library, we'll buy 2 copies of a book. One that is less in demand, but one that we recognize has reference value. We will make 1 copy of the book circulating and the other copy reference. In this way, there'll always be a copy available for consultation. Children's books are ordered pre-processed and cataloged. That means the supplier not only obtains the books for the library, but also attaches labels and barcodes and catalogs the books so they're ready to be placed on the shelves as soon as we receive them. Most books for the adult collection are cataloged, labeled, and wrapped in a protective cover by staff in the library's Technical Services Department. They are then placed in shipping bins that are delivered to each branch and to each main library department. Every weekday, the delivery van travels throughout the city to take new materials to the branches. When the new books are received at each branch, the staff unloads the shipment and adds the new titles to their collection. Some books go right to the new books display shelf. Some books are new editions that replace an older edition. This older volume is then withdrawn from the branch collection and sent to the main library. Some books are simply shelved in the branch collection. Some books are put aside immediately to fill reserves that have been placed for them in branch libraries throughout the city. The incoming flow of new material is usually an ongoing process. Once they are placed on the library's shelves, the lives of these books proceed. And, just like real life, things happen to them. If they're popular, they're checked out again and again and again. Wear and tear begins to show. Eventually, a much-used copy of a book becomes dog-eared, or the binding may split, or pages may fall out. Sometimes accidents happen. The library staff is trained to watch for damage and wear. Usually, as books come back from circulation, problems are spotted and books are put aside rather than returned to the shelves. Some problems, like dampness or mold, need urgent attention. Books that have become damp must be removed from the collection immediately before they infect other books. Others, like a missing barcode or spine label, can be set aside to be repaired in a batch. The librarian reviews these wounded warriors to decide which books should be repaired, if this is feasible or if the book is out of print, replaced, if they are beyond repair and still in print, or withdrawn from the collection. When reviewing books that are damaged, the librarian always checks to see what other copies of the book are still in the library's collection. If this is the last copy in the library's collection, the librarian determines whether or not this book should be replaced. He or she checks to see if this is a standard title, if the content of the book is covered adequately by other titles in the collection, if there is historical value to the book, if it is widely held by other libraries, and or other factors that can weigh in the decision on whether or not to keep a specific book. Librarians are also responsible for keeping an eye on the materials in their part of the collection, whether or not they circulate. On a regular basis, they are expected to look at the books on the shelves to spot titles that are in disrepair. Now, somehow, these volumes sneak back on the shelves, no matter how vigilant our circulation staff are. Or titles that are usually mixed up on the shelf. This generally means that the material is in high demand and needs close attention. Often items in these areas are missing or lost and need replacement. Or items that are shelf sitters. This may mean that the material is not as needed and weeding is in order. Or things that are always missing. Or things that need to be reclassified as reference items. And finally, when the shelves are too tight and less used items need to be removed and stored. The main library librarians are responsible for reviewing last copies of books removed from the branch library collections. Subject specialists in each department review these titles to decide whether or not they should be retained at the main library for system-wide access. The library's collection is a living organism. It grows and evolves constantly due to the work of many library staff. The decision-making process that manages this growth goes on all the time, made up of the work of most of the library's public service librarians, each making individual decisions every day. I'd like to thank our media production unit for putting together this video on a rather tight schedule. I think Dave and his staff did an excellent job. We're now going to go to our presentations, and the first speaker is going to be Terry Gwiazdowski. Terry, I hope I didn't mangle your name. Mine is hard enough. Terry is a librarian at the EXCELSIOR Branch Library, and you're going to be talking about how you manage that collection. Terry?
Well, that wonderful video kind of eclipsed some of the things I'm going to say, but you want to hear it again anyway. Librarians, like other groups of professionals, have developed their own unique language to communicate among ourselves. Computer professionals say reboot the system to mean restart the computer. I know, it sounds silly to me too, but hey, they have their reasons. Just as we speak of collections, titles, holdings, and other terminology when we discuss books, cassettes, videos, CDs, magazines, or maybe their journals, or periodicals, or serials, etc. You're going to be hearing these terms a lot this evening, and that's why you have a little glossary with some of the key terms in your handouts this evening. As Regina said, I'm going to be talking about how the branches perform collection management, which is somewhat different than how the main library does it. I'll be using my branch, Excelsior, as an example. I'm going to discuss how we select, order, evaluate the materials at the branch. Our goal is to provide our patrons with the books they want, need, and request. The branch manager is given a budget that gets divided up for purchasing adult books, videos, cassettes, compact discs, and magazines. The children's librarians get a separate budget for purchasing children's materials, and you're going to be hearing about the special way that the children's department selects and orders and whatnot later on in the program. So, how do we know what our patrons want? Well, as the video showed, they tell us. They come into the branch, they want that, The Ghost, or whatever the latest Danielle Steele is. Nora Roberts, which is a very popular author at our branch. John Grisham come out with The Partner, making its way around the branches, and other popular authors. They ask for the books on Oprah Winfrey's show. If the title is not in our computer catalog, it soon will be. If it's not a familiar author or a popular subject, we still put in book requests. I assisted an Excelsior patron recently by making sure the book Slant by science fiction writer Greg Bear was purchased for the branches. We also have a materials selection office where staff monitor reserves. If there are a lot of reserves for a particular book, more copies are ordered. They also follow the local bestseller lists, which show what patrons in the Bay Area read. Drink here. All right, so now we know what they want. How do we know what patrons need? Well, that's where librarians act as private investigators. All right, it's not quite like Sherlock Holmes, but we do it. We research who lives and works in the Excelsior neighborhood. We follow up book reviews, just like private investigators follow up leads. The branch manager develops relationships with neighborhood groups, and we study the makeup of the Excelsior population. For instance, we know that the Excelsior neighborhood has the highest concentration of schools, and therefore the highest concentration of school-age children in the city. This means that we regularly purchase materials that will assist our younger patrons with their homework assignments. Facts about states and countries are popular assignments. So the children's department collects individual state and country books, and the adult department purchases reference books that compile the major facts about the states and the countries. So patron input is clearly the most important element in our selection process. Librarians also review, as you saw in the video, magazine and newspaper book reviews, just like you do. We receive publishers' catalogs that describe the soon-to-be published books, and we go to bookstores to evaluate the books ourselves. I recently visited Borders and Stacy's, both very popular bookstores downtown, when I was investigating books for a list that was an order list for business and technology subjects. And it was good to really go in there and look at every book, especially at the home repair books, because I could evaluate whether they would be good for our patrons who like to fix things themselves. So, now that we know what you, our patrons, want and need, what happens next? Well, you know what comes next, don't you? Meetings. Now there's a humorous book that should be written, The Joy of Meetings. But maybe not. Anyway, librarians have a selection meeting once a month to decide which books out of all the wanted ones will get ordered. The monthly lists include new books and also new editions of books already purchased, replacements for worn out or missing copies, books on tape, videos, CDs. The selection committee also puts together subject lists which concentrate on a general area of the collection, such as travel and history, or repair books. When the lists are complete, the ordering part of collection management occurs. Once a list has been created, the records are input into our online catalog. And we saw a little bit the MSL on order kind of thing. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other things that are shown and displayed in the catalog. But the lists then go out to each branch, and as you know, we have 26 branches. It's a large system. Librarians at Excelsior then mark their choices, based, of course, on, again, our patrons' wants and needs, but also within our budget limitations. And we know what those are about. Having to use one paycheck for the rent and another for the groceries, it's the same thing at Excelsior branch. One list may look really juicy. In fact, the one I'm working on right now, just the regular old list, just has so many books that we want to order for our branch. But we know we'll have to go easy on that list because what's coming up is going to be a history list. And history is a good subject for homework assignments of all levels, from grade school on up. We have students from City College that visit, doing research papers on, the implications of the Revolutionary War. So history is a big subject, so we have to go a little light on this one and wait for that one. Same thing you do when you're budgeting your money. So the total amount we have to spend determines how many books we can order. The branch manager, who knows the strengths and weaknesses of the collection and who keeps track of what money has been spent and what is left, makes the final order decisions. Then we have our technical staff input the books through our online acquisitions program. And at this point, this is where the patrons can check the catalog to see what's available for ordering and what's not. When all the branches have made their selections, the lists are sent to the purchasing vendors. All right, then during that period of waiting, sometimes it does feel like forever, doesn't it? The books finally arrive at the main, and they get processed, and they get their wonderful little protective plastic covers, and processed in other ways, as you saw, to make them the property of San Francisco Public Library. And I don't know about you, but I'm grateful for those plastic covers, because I like to drink at the kitchen table a cup of tea while I'm reading. And those plastic covers have saved me a number of times. The books are readied at the main, and then they're sent to the branches. And at each of these steps, as they kind of move along in real life, they also move along sort of online. And the online catalog reflects the change in the book's status. Patrons will see a message, ask a librarian for holdings information. Holdings, ooh, that's in the little handout of what a holding is. When the book orders have gone in, the record shows Excelsior on order. All right, we're getting close. And when the books are received at the main, the record shows Excelsior branch, the call number, wow, we're getting really close, the year, and the availability is route or route. But what does that mean, route? And here's an instance where we actually tell you. We tell you that it's at the processing department, the technical service department, getting its little processing happening. So everybody is ready for that book to arrive. Then it arrives at Excelsior branch. And we do a few more things like date stamp it, put our little name on it, and then it's available for borrowing. Yay! So that's the end of the story, right? No way. You're going to be my captive audience for a few more minutes. After the books arrive at Excelsior or the other branches, they're available for patrons to check out, and they do get borrowed. And of course, we like to borrow them too. And this is the biggest point, that patrons have books to borrow that they want and love. But there is more to the story. As time goes on, librarians track the books to see how they're doing. This is the maintenance part of collection management, the evaluation of our collections. The librarians at Excelsior branch keep track of how frequently a book is borrowed or used in the branch. And periodically, the whole library system has ways to determine how often a book is used by these surveys, like don't put your book away, keep them on the table. So, because we know that some books are borrowed and borrowed and borrowed and borrowed, and other books, like reference books, are used and used and used and used, but only in the library. and we need to know how we're doing in that area too. We notice the physical condition of the book. Is it readable? Are there pages missing? Paperback books wear out quicker than hardcover ones, so we keep a special eye on them. And with the other eye, we look for outdated information. Books such as almanacs are purchased every year because they contain information such as leaders of countries, which need to be very current. In fact, we evaluate the collections on a regular basis to determine the value of each book. For instance, some of the parts of the collection that I've been evaluating are the repair books, the home improvement books, the technology books like computer repair and that kind of thing, biographies, the subject books about famous people. So I'm doing that over the course of months. Areas such as medicine and law need constant care to ensure that the information contained in these books is as correct as possible. And we feel very strongly that our patrons should get the best information, because if the information affects your health or your pocketbook, it matters to us that we get it right. So I hope you see that the story of collection management has no end. It's like a wheel turning around and around. Books that contain outdated information are replaced by books that contain current information. Books that are worn out are either repaired or replaced. Books that aren't circulating well at our branch find a home at another branch where their copy may be missing. Books that have historical value, as we saw, are retained at the main library. And classic literature, such as John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men, Pablo Neruda's poetry, Lorraine Hansberry's play A Raisin in the Sun, are reordered when older copies wear out or a new edition is published. Okay. All right, here it comes. The part that librarians dread and patrons fear. Do we get rid of books? Yes, we do. We call it weeding. I have my little weeding prop. Gonna cut out those weeds. Everyone knows the term weeding is something you do in the garden. You have to get rid of those dandelions and that clover because they crowd out your beautiful roses and those exquisite tomatoes. But really, everything has a shelf life, even Twinkies. It's really no different for books. Some simply cannot be repaired, and you saw some of the wounded warriors, as our city librarian has said. Some are too outdated, and there is no new edition for that particular book. I was actually embarrassed to find a book on the immune system on our shelves from 1976. Those were the days before AIDS and the tremendous research on how the immune system works and how it breaks down. I had no problem discarding that book from our collection. Weeded it right out. I also discovered that other books that weren't specifically AIDS or HIV weren't in our collection. We didn't have a general book on the immune system. That still didn't change my decision to discard that particular book and remove it from our shelves. But I started investigating replacement books on that subject. So we do pull books off the shelves, but it's really not at all like pulling weeds out of a garden. It's like common sense crop rotation. I've had tomatoes growing the last couple years in the same spot, because that's the sunniest spot in my backyard. And even though I've fertilized every year, I really need to change what's planted there now. It's really like a cycle of growth and turnover and new growth. Books and gardens are similar in that way. We discard books for the reasons I have mentioned, and we select and purchase new and replacement books to fill those gaps. We want you, our valued patrons, to know that we strive to keep our collections lively and vital, and that we cover the subject areas that are essential to the Excelsior neighborhood. And all the branches do the same thing in their neighborhoods. So come on down. Visit us at the branches. Check out a couple of books. let us know how we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Excellent job, and hold on to your implement. I thought you were going to use it as part of your detective thing with having Sam Spade or something like that, which would be somewhat of local interest. Our next speaker is Grace Ruth. Grace is the children's collection specialist here at the main library. She works entirely with children's material and has become a nationwide authority on children's books, having served on a number of ALA committees which select the best of the children's books over the years. And Grace's topic is children's collection management. What a surprise. Grace.
Great.
And you have your props.
I have my props. A lot of what's been said has its application to selecting children's materials. So I didn't want to repeat, and I thought what I would emphasize are the two things that we do very differently in children's services. The first is selection of new titles. We are lucky in the fact that we don't have the demand for bestsellers, so to speak, that adult selection librarians face. Children's publishers, most of the major houses, send us what they call review copies. These are complimentary copies. We are lucky that we are not in smaller libraries who often get on plans such as a Greenaway plan where they're purchasing review copies. Most publishers feel that a large system, it's worth their while to send us complimentary copies of their books. So these books arrive in boxes in the Office of Children's and Youth Services, and we go through them. We review most of them. We at least examine them and see what on the surface we think fits our needs. So the really good things, the things that we think we want to seriously consider, we review. Every children's librarian is involved in this process. They'll either come down to the library and make their selections, or they have filled out forms of reviewer interest forms for us. And so in the office, Shelley Cocking and myself will assign out review books. And each children's librarian is responsible for reviewing at least 4 a month, or if they're part-time, a little less. They will read the review, and they will evaluate the book and fill out a review slip, and then send it back to the office. And at that point, we go through the books that have been reviewed and select the ones that we will discuss at our monthly selection meetings. And you did see a quick blurb of a children's book evaluation committee meeting on the tape. So all the children's librarians are involved at a variety of levels. They're involved in the reviewing level. At the reviewing level, they are looking at just that individual book and comparing it perhaps in the case of The Gingerbread Boy by Richard E. Gwiazdowski, which is a new and very modern interpretation of a familiar old story, and he has illustrated it set in the city. So it's quite different from the country setting of most of the versions that we already have. So the reviews will evaluate the writing and the art in the book, and then they send it in. The book selection committee, which is a rotating committee, children's librarians come on and off for 4 months, so that in a 2 or 3 year period, everyone has taken part in the process. We will go over at the book selection committee meetings and make our monthly order lists. At that point in time, people are looking at the books in a stack of similar books, like someone will be looking at fiction, someone will be looking at nonfiction, someone will look at beginning readers, different types of materials that we're considering. And at that point, the person who presents the books will consider the book in light of the whole collection and where it fits in with other similar materials that we have in our collection. And from this, we make our new book lists. Also on our new book lists each month, We have replacement titles, and these are the titles that the children's librarians have sent in and said, hey, we need a rush copy of this, we're out of it in our collection. Or if, for instance, this month we have some new fiction titles on our list, and they're sequels to something that we've had in the collection, well, then we'll offer the original volumes again, so that if people don't have it, or if they want to replace copies, they can do that. So that's the major difference in the collection selection of new books from children's to adults. There are about 5,000 new children's books published a year, and we probably consider close to 2,500 of those. If publishers don't send us a copy and it's a book that's gotten a lot of good reviews, we will order a copy for review. I just wanted to mention also on our new book list that's coming up, we have some materials for children in Spanish, and we have staff that reads and reviews in Spanish language also. And we try to, in the other language materials that we buy, balance our collection between new titles and titles that have been popular in English and that are being published, in most cases in the United States, in Spanish. We do read reviews, so I thought I'd just point out a few of the things that are available. They are on reference, but you're certainly welcome to look at them. School Library Journal reviews almost all the new children's books that come out. And then a few others review, a few less, but they're really good, solid reviews for ours. The Bulletin of the Center for Children's Books comes out of the University of Illinois from the Library and Information Studies School there. The Hornbook magazine, which I think a lot of parents do subscribe to. That's a much more popular but literary magazine. And the reviewing magazine of the American Library Association that we all use called Book List. It comes out twice a month. Now, when we are handling our replacement, in addition to the books that we will replace because of real urgent need, we try to cover the whole collection in reevaluating it. And this is done about every 5 years. We get through the whole collection. But what we do is we assign a section. We're working right now on the second half of the 500s, which in effect turned out to be just the 590s, because in children's, books on animals are something that we have constant and very heavy demand for. So when every librarian gets a section that they have requested or is assigned to them to reevaluate. And while they're doing this, they are looking at the new books that have come out that are on that subject, the books that are already in the collection. Then they're checking to see what is still available, what we can still buy, so that when we make a new book list from that, we have 4 sections to it. We have the section that's the replacement of standard and old titles. We have a section with new books that fall into that area. Then we have something we call no longer buying, and that in effect is the list of books that are still in the collection that are outdated, that we no longer want to replace and that we feel really should be weeded from the collection. And then we have a 4th section that we call our historical collection. And these books come into the library and are added to the F.E. Lee Morris Historical Collection of Children's Books. And they're examples of types of books that we feel people should be able to see in a progress of children's literature and the things that were available at different times. We also, in making this job easier for everyone, each time send out reminders and directions on things, on reviewing, on evaluating the section. The one I brought with me that you can see an example of is guidelines for evaluating juvenile biography. But we will try to put out guidelines each time so that people are reminded of things to be looking for in the areas of their section. And so you don't think that we just say, oh, well, that's old or out of date, or we haven't really checked. We do have standard guides like Children's Catalog. That's a standard collection, a basic collection for children's services. And then specialized guides like literature-based science, children's books and activities to enrich K-5 curriculum, but it emphasizes the best science books available. Things like This Land is Our Land, a guide to multicultural literature for children and young adults by Hellberg and Perkins. Or things like Beyond Picture Books by Barb Barstow and Judith Riggle, and this is a guide to beginning readers. So we do check against bibliographies that are subject-specific in making these decisions, as well as rereading and reevaluating, and then comparing the old with the new and what's available. So those are basically the things that we do differently. I didn't really want to repeat a lot of the same information, so if you have questions afterwards, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Grace. What would you be without the books that you can show us?
Yeah.
Every month she sends me my picture book of the month. So as a city librarian, I get to keep up with the best in new children's literature. It's very important to me because picture books are works of art in many cases. And as I have many great nieces and nephews, it helps me in the upcoming season. So thank you, Grace. Our next speaker, our last speaker, and not our least, of course, is Ed McRae. Ed is the Jobs and Careers Librarian. He works in the Business and Technology Department here in the main library, and he's going to talk about the Jobs and Careers collection. Ed?
Hello, my name is Ed McRae, and I'm the Jobs and Careers Librarian. I'd like to share with you, first of all, let me just inform you that I don't have any props because this is my first day back to work. In 2 weeks, I've been out and I've had throat surgery so that if all of a sudden everything goes quiet, you'll know why, okay? But this is the chance for me to try out my new voice and to see how it works. The Jobs and Careers Center is one of the most unusual centers, so you're going to hear me say some things that are not like what everyone else has said. First of all, I need to go back and point out that when I took that collection over, there weren't a lot of books in that section, and so that no matter what direction I would have gone in, I would have been okay, because what it needed at that point was increasing the collection, and the only guidelines then for me were to make sure that they were in the right area as far as pertaining to jobs or careers, things of that nature. The Jobs and Careers Center, that collection spans the whole Dewey system, from 4, I believe, to 973. So that when I read that collection, the books go on, I don't necessarily follow them after they become circulating, because then they become, they belong in the area of whoever that librarian is who orders that particular Dewey number. Okay, for instance, I have a special Dewey number that I order for, and that's 660, I believe, to 669. But if one of the books in jobs, once I take that book from reference to circulating, if it's not a 660 through 669, then I don't need to worry about tracking that book or what happens to it. Of course, the way in which I select books are pretty much the same as other people. I get the Library Journal, Publishers Catalogs. I get citations. However, that accounts for only a fraction of the books that are there. The collection is growing by leaps and bounds. The other way I select books or by other librarians will send me notes, or they'll see something that's interesting, and then they will highlight it for me and send that to me. I also use that information, and that's an invitation to any of you. If you see something, if it pertains to jobs, I'm interested. Also, another way is that since I've been Jobs and Careers Librarian for a while, I sort of eat, sleep, and drink that subject. So no matter where I am out in the world, if I spot something, if it pertains to jobs and careers, then I sort of pounce on it, and I make sure I go to books in print to see if I can find a current copy. The other thing is I try and make sure that the Jobs and Careers collection is current. If you were to go into that section now, you wouldn't find very many older books. I'm always weeding. I try and keep nothing older than 2 years old. If it's 1994, 95, if there's something newer out there, then I will have it. I will pull that and make it circulating. The biggest way in which I collect books is by weeding. That's the major way in which I select new books for the center. But I also receive suggestions from patrons. Oftentimes they will, when I'm talking to them or helping them out, they will give me a title, or sometimes they come in and request a title that I don't have. So I'll make sure that I go into books in print or Amazon on the internet, Amazon.com, and to see which titles are there that I can use. By now, I think that the Jobs and Careers collection, even that whole center, is becoming sort of a regional resource, if you will. And so that I take it very serious. I take it very seriously. And I'm always reading. I'm always looking for something new. Not a day goes by that I'm not looking at books in print. I'm always in that center, and I sort of need to be because it gets used a lot. There's a lot of traffic in there, so that at any given time somebody has brought their stash in and hid them, some books that have nothing to do with my collection, and they've sort of tucked them in between so that they can find them the next day, so I have to look out for that. But also, a lot of times when I think that a book has disappeared, it may be on the third floor where someone has stashed it so that they can retrieve it again the next day or the next week. So that when one of my books disappears, normally what I'll do is send something out over the email and ask people to keep their eyes peeled for it, but then I'll sort of give it a week or two, and usually it reappears. Now, that's a general statement. However, there are exceptions. Sometimes it's just flat out stolen, because we get a lot of that too. Sometimes people fall in love with the books. Normally, I order one copy that's referenced, and then I'll order 2 to 3 copies that are circulating. But the circulating copy seems to end up missing or borrowed, assume lost or borrowed. I think that's the correct notation in the DRA system. And so then it's not long after that that the reference copy will disappear, especially if it's a high-profile copy that somebody likes. For instance, there's one there now that's called the 1997 Job Finder's Almanac. So I just ordered 2 additional copies because the one copy that I had, I ordered just one copy because it was kind of expensive. I ordered one copy for the Jobs and Career Center, but what happened is it ended up missing for a month. And so I gave it a few weeks to reappear. It didn't reappear, so I ended up ordering another copy. And then because of the information contained within that particular volume, there's information on, there's information on salary surveys, and we get a lot of questions on that. And there's also information, thank you. There's also a lot of information on job descriptions. And those are 2 biggies as far as jobs and careers are concerned. And because that particular book is chock full of that kind of information, I decided to order 1 copy for the reference desk also. So now I ended up with 3 copies in jobs and careers. But it's not a waste because they do get a workout. I think that's going to be as much as I'm going to say about jobs and careers. Oh, one other thing I don't want to leave out is the fact that not only do I update that collection, but I also have to keep my eye out for the changing market out there. I mean, it's not like philosophy or poetry. In the jobs area, the internet has become very important, so I have to keep my eyes out for internet titles, how to hang your resume out on the internet, how to search for jobs on the internet, and there are a lot of those titles that are coming into play, and so I have to make sure that I keep up to date with that. And I'm at the point now where I'm confident enough and my collection is big enough where I can branch out and start to move beyond the traditional middle-of-the-road Department of Labor type job descriptions. I can look for more esoteric type job descriptions because people are beginning to demand that. However, as yet I haven't seen anything on bat cave monitoring, for those people who like a little night work, or nothing on Pacific Island reef photography. Okay, so if you see anything like that, I want you to be sure and highlight it and send it to me post haste. Okay? Are there any questions about anything I've said so far? Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Excellent job. As you can see, the selection of material for the library is a complex and ongoing process. It never ends from one end to the other, from the selection of the material to the final decision as to the disposition of a book, whether there's something wrong with it because it is a wounded warrior, whether it has developed feet, as we say, and walked out the door by itself, which happens, as John knows quite well, as Ed knows quite well, I'm sorry. But the collection development and maintenance process in a major public library like San Francisco is one that is a continuing effort. And as we said in the video, over 200 librarians participate in this process on a daily basis. It's not that we just select book once a month or once a week or once a year. These kinds of things go on constantly. As our librarians are working with the public, they're learning what the public wants. As they're responding to questions, they're pigeonholing in their heads. Oh, I saw a book on that last week. Where was that? I need that. The children's librarians are understanding the kind of demand that comes forth when a school assignment comes in. For goodness sake, how many books on missions can we buy? As many as there are, right? Is the answer. So we're hoping that from the presentations from our librarians that you've gotten a little better idea of how we go about this process. Now it's your chance. If you have any questions you'd like to ask us, please use the microphone. Not only will it be easier for the rest of the audience to hear you, but it will get on tape. So please come to the mic that's in the center, and our expert panel will answer you as well as they can.
First thing I'd like to say is what a great program this is. This is really wonderful. I'd really like to thank all of you for taking the time to explain all this. I have a question, and that's about the time at which we might find a book on our library shelf from the time that it's been published or we've read a book review. And obviously there's probably a great range for children's books, and I wonder if you could tell us the best case scenario and the worst case scenario, and what some of the factors are that might affect that.
Okay, Ann Roughton has just joined us up on the panel. Ann is the material selection manager for the library. Who wants to take first crack at that?
I'll take first crack at it. It really depends. If it's a bestseller, you're probably going to find it not on the shelf, but it will be circulating the same month it's published. The reason you're not going to find it on the shelf is it may well be reserved. And there may be quite a big reserve queue, so you have to wait. For a lot of the new books, new biographies, new novels that go onto our just regular lists and we don't do really super early purchase on. If we predict that a book is going to be a bestseller or just a very popular book, we're ordering it 2 months before it's published, and it will be shipped often the day that it's published. Today we just got the new P.D. James in. It just got released. You know, the publishers have a release date, and it was sent from a local vendor today, 50 copies of it. For a lot of the other books that appear on the monthly selection list, adult monthly selection, probably it will be 2 or 3 months before you get them. It really varies, but it will often be that long. We are having some, I won't go into a long explanation, but we are having some delays this year that we're having to deal with in terms of ordering materials. Other materials can take a lot longer. If we have to go direct to a small vendor or a small publisher, there are a lot of city rules and regulations now that we have to get through, and that can take literally months, so that some things that we really need sooner rather than later, we're getting late. So, I don't know if that's a beginning answer. So.
Well, I think the answer is that there is no answer for one
Yeah.
specific book, but that it varies enormously. And Anne has very clearly explained all of the different things that can happen. Grace, you wanted to respond with regard
Yeah.
to children's material?
I'd say that because of the review process, ours are a little slower to get on the shelf, probably, 6 months to a year and a half. Now, if things win a major award, like the Newbery and Caldecott Awards, we place rush orders and try to get those in if we haven't already purchased them. We do try to anticipate titles like that and get them in the collection before they're named winners of those major awards. There are things that we will, if we see are coming out, like if Beverly Cleary, who's written all those Ramona books, has a new book coming out, we'll just order a copy for everyone and get that in fast. But once in a while, things take, a lot longer than that in terms of the review and getting it through the process.
Thanks, Grace. Terry, Ed, anything to add from your perspective? Okay. Another question. Yes, sir.
I'm grateful to the panel for describing how they select their books. As a book dealer, I'd be interested in knowing how you select your vendors.
Ah, Anne, you want to take a cut at that one? And I'll be happy to speak to it as well if you like.
Well, this year we have some new complications in terms of selecting vendors because our vendors have to be in compliance with the domestic partners. And so this year we had to switch our major vendor. Our major vendor had been Baker & Taylor, a very large vendor in Reno. Overnight delivery possible from there. They are not in compliance, and they are not planning to be in compliance. Therefore, we have gone to Brodart, which is another major library vendor. They are in Pennsylvania. It takes about a week for their books to get here. We're still sort of working with them. So far, they've been pretty good. But in addition to that, we use another big vendor we use is Midwest. But at the moment, we cannot use Ingram. We cannot use Baker & Taylor. We cannot use Blackwell because they are not in compliance. We can't use Yankee Peddler. These are all major, large book vendors that most libraries use. We cannot use Yankee Peddler. And then we go to just a whole lot. And locally, we go to LS Books in South San Francisco to do a lot of off-shelf buying. And this year, we're getting a lot of our bestsellers from them. The P.D. James that came today was from LS. We're going to start using Book People across in Oakland more, but they're not in compliance quite yet. They will be, but they're not. And then we have just a whole lot of smaller vendors who we go to. We have one vendor we go to for all of our AV materials. PMSC, because that vendor also processes and catalogs our materials, those AV materials. So, and we're talking to new vendors all the time. Of course, people want our business. We're a big library. We have a lot of money to spend. But we also do a lot of direct ordering. We order, because we're such a diverse and multicultural city, and we're a large library, we have to do a lot of directories, a lot of business directories. Won't sell to vendors. They will only sell direct to a library or to an individual or whatever. And for one copy of one book this year, we have to have domestic compliance before we can deal with that vendor, even for one copy of one book, which is making our lives a little bit difficult. I don't know, Grace, do you want to talk about that?
I was going to say that the library administration really decided that Brodart would be our major children's vendor, and that was because they will pre-process and pre-catalog, and they can download the information directly into DRA. And at the time that decision was made, a lot of other of the major vendors did not have the capability to download the material into DRA. And that's a direct result of, the number of people in technical services who would have otherwise handled all that material. In terms of other specialized things, we do the same thing. We will buy off shelf at LS, where we can pick up multiple copies of something that's new and is going to be a big hit, or some paperback books that are real popular demand type items, or books that will fit some of the programming we do, that type of thing. And also books in languages other than English, we will go buy off shelf from local dealers.
Ed or Terry, any comments on this? Okay. Terry?
Well, yeah, I participated in what they call off-shelf, where you go to a small shop. We've gone to, it actually flies out of my head, but it was a science fiction bookstore in Berkeley, I believe, and then we ordered for the entire branches paperback books and science fiction.
There are a number of considerations a library has when determining a vendor. For the most part, we're interested in discount. We have a fiduciary responsibility to make the best possible buys that we can so that our library materials budget, which is not unlimited, goes as far as possible. The second thing we have to consider is delivery. Are they going to be able to deliver the books in a timely fashion so that we can get them out to the public, as Anne has indicated? The third thing we have to deal with is the diversity and the many different languages that we purchase and the many different kinds of cultures that we are trying to represent in the library. And how many vendors are we using? It's in the thousands, isn't it?
It's, I think it's a couple thousand, although it may be diminished a little bit this
Because of
year
the-
because of the paperwork involved, but it's hundreds and hundreds.
Yeah, I sign. And by the way, we are not prohibited from buying a book just because somebody is not in compliance. If a publisher is the only place we can buy that, then we get an exception and we can buy something through a process which is called sole source. So the library is limited in its ability to use vendors, but not necessarily limited in our ability to buy a specific book. Because if there's only one place to buy that, we can get it from those people. We can use what's called sole source. We do really look at the vendor's ability to deliver for us, the vendor's ability to give us a discount, and the vendor's ability to deal with the number of copies that we require for a library of this size. Other questions?
Hi, thanks very much for this excellent program. I'm interested in two particular areas. First is the science collection. Is the target the general public or the more educated, higher level science reader? And if in the area of the more technical books, is it regarded as a standalone collection, or is it intended merely to supplement the universities in the area?
Okay, you have, let's
On the
deal
science.
with the, I think it'll be easier for us, if you don't mind, to deal with the first part. Is our scientific and tech, what is our target for our science collections? I think that the main library would have one response and the branch libraries would have another. So let's hear from the branches first. Terry?
Yeah, we collect in all the areas, but we'll answer directly science for grade school, middle school, high school, and young adult, and general adult readership. Sometimes there'll be a book that university, lower grades of university or city college will be able to use, but in the branches they're largely popular science, science of interest to the general population.
Ed or Ann, you want to respond to the main library issue? And what kind of science collections we're developing here?
It's a popular collection. I don't feel totally comfortable responding for the science department at the Maine, but I do see their orders. So it's a popular collection. I mean, they buy some things at college level, but not a lot. It's for the general reader for the most part.
You do stock journals, though, for the
Yes,
for the
oh yeah, they
technical.
stock a lot of journals. And of course, in the Maine, I wish there was somebody here who could really speak to it better than I do. But you mean straight science. You don't mean the science department here, so the broader issue.
Physics, geology,
Right,
chemistry.
right.
I think you'd find that this library is a reference library, not a research library, so that we would not necessarily be trying to duplicate what you would find at the University of California or at Stanford. We would be purchasing materials at the branch libraries, as Terry so well stated, and then at the main library, you'd find we probably get a little more technical than at the average branch. What we probably are not getting to the level of what a real science researcher would want, because in the first place, they are using mostly journals now. Now, you had a second part to your
The
question.
other area that I was interested in is the cross-neighborhood patron. I live in the Haight. I'm a fiction reader, and we get very few books there. I've discussed it with the librarians, and it's sort of the situation. We don't get many books because people don't check out many books, to which I reply, I don't check out many books because there aren't any books to check out. So I go to the Marina and the Richmond branch. How are my use patterns, for example, taken into account?
Do you want to take a cut at that, Terry, or would you like me?
Yes, please.
It's called punting. The smaller branches have smaller budgets, and it really, I could justify on both sides of your question with equal vehemence and equal eloquence, I would hope. Big library, more people coming in, more demand, therefore more books, more money. Small library, not enough people, not enough demand, not enough books, not enough money. So somewhere, this is where the art comes in, not the science. Somewhere we try to figure out a method of allocating our resources, our library resource money for books, so that the small branch, like Park Branch, has enough money to buy the staple basic collections and new books and popular materials, and the larger libraries, such as our resource libraries, like Excelsior is one, West Portal, Richmond, Chinatown, oh God, please help me. Mission, West Portal. Sunset, thank you. I worked at Sunset, how could I forget that? So that the larger libraries have more resources and can handle it more. We also know that this is not a large city, that if you live in the Haight, it's not really hard for you to get to the Marina, or if you live in Excelsior, West Portal isn't all that far away either. We do understand that people go from library to library, and I'll bet the really sophisticated library user figures out what branch isn't going to be used quite as much, but is going to have the new book on the shelf, and that's the branch they go to. I see some of you laughing. That's what I did as a library user, too. I find out where it's most likely to be in. The collection maintenance and development is an art. It is not a science. Sometimes we fail. Most often, I think we succeed. Anybody else want to take a cut at that?
I just wanted to make sure we understood your question, and the reason why I was a little unsure about the answer was, could we track what use someone from a small branch using a larger branch, and that I'm not sure. I know inside DRA, if you got your library card from the Park branch, we'll know that you got your library card from the Park branch, but I don't know if it goes any further beyond that. That's why I was...
Well, and not only that, but for your own privacy, once you have returned a book, your connection with that book is gone. And so we don't want to know, where you have borrowed your books and what books you have checked out. That's a privacy issue, and we feel very strongly that a person has a very deep and inviolate right to have the material they read their own business and nobody else's. That's why we can't even track what people read. How about credit for the ones you returned early instead of the ones you keep over? Oh, so the brand. I don't think our system gives us information that well, but not a bad idea. Interesting. I'm sure some of the smaller branches would be quite interested in getting that together. Other questions? Do the small branches get credit for books that are borrowed from another, that come through them? Yes, they do. Yes.
I'm going to speak sort of on that. I also have a neighborhood small library that doesn't have a very large collection and not always suiting what I'm looking for. I have found, and maybe you can suggest a better solution to the problem, but what I have found is that with the advent of the online catalog, I can find out where the book is and choose whether to go and get it there or whether to just walk on home in a few minutes and make a phone call and have it sent to my branch. Is there any are there other alternatives to accessing the books that aren't in one's own branch?
You've figured out the best way. That's what we would do. We would go, we would check the catalog, we would find out where the holdings are, we'd see whether or not the catalog says that book is available. And I would never, I would always call before I went to a branch. If it says available, I always want to know, is it really available? Is it on the shelf, and will they save it for me? And our librarians are more than willing to do that for you. If a book is not in your neighborhood library, and it is in a library across town, and you don't want to take time to do that, you can call that library across town, and they'll send it to your neighborhood branch for you. It will take a couple of days, but that will be done. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Does each branch know what the other branches have selected? So is there some committee or some communication so that everybody doesn't order Danielle Steele and then run out of money to buy anything else?
Anne?
Well, they can, with the new computer system, if they want to. We have computerized ordering, so we put our order list, we print it out, but we also, it's online, and they actually order online. And you can go into an order list that's currently being worked on, or that has been one that's closed, and you can see who has ordered which titles. Although actually for Danielle Steele and some of those books come McNaughton's. Now, those of you who use the library, I assume, know what the McNaughton books are. They're the books that we lease. With the McNaughton's, one branch does not know what the other branch has, but has ordered. I know because everybody sends me that information, and I use that information. But in the adult, now this is different. With the children's, that's not necessarily true, is it?
In the children's, we are not doing our ordering online yet. And we have order slips in the books, and when the children's librarians come to our monthly, not the selection meeting, but the meeting, our business meeting, where they can also order, they can see what other people are ordering right there.
Does everyone know that when you're in the online catalog in PAC, that if you just keep pushing enter, that you'll see what's been ordered? I mean, in addition to if we own a book, they'll show the holdings. But if a book is just on order, if you keep pushing enter, it'll show you where it's been ordered, which locations have it on order. And I sometimes get the feeling that even some of our staff don't remember that fact. So, there's some very wonderful things about the computerized thing that we're working with now.
That's good advice, Ann. We have to remember just to keep pushing enter, and then you can tell what the holdings are on the ordered ones, not just that somewhere in the Ethernet it's been ordered. Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious about something. I recently read a book that was 50 years old by a Nobel Prize winner, and I discovered it was the first edition, and it had a good dust cover. And I wondered, do you make any attempt to be sure that gets to the special collections, or something? Maybe they have it already. I don't know. But it seemed to me, and I once read a Robert Louis Stevenson book, which I discovered was the first edition. It was really old, but it had been rebound, so it was worthless then. But is there any attempt to do that? Because I know we can't acquire a lot of things for the special collections either because of budget constraints.
When people become aware of it, they do send them on. But of course, it's very time-consuming. But in the course of maintaining your collection, I mean, of going through and seeing what needs to be maybe sent to be rebound, or just to be taken care of, or to be weeded, or whatever,
or where you need new editions. In that whole process, many of the librarians go through their entire collections, or in the main library, they'll go through their order areas. Say that if they're ordering the 910s, they'll go through that regularly and look for various things. And if they see something like that, yes, they will. But of course, the staff does not have a lot of time right now. I mean,
Should a patron ask about a book like that and bring it to someone's attention?
well, yes, I think so. I think that, yes, I would.
I think that'd be very helpful for us. This is a very old collection. This library was started in 1888 and began buying books then. We probably might even still have some that we bought in 1888 or that were given to us. And it's very hard for us to go through the entire collection and catch everything because things circulate. When I went to library school at the University of California, one of the things that we were given to do as library school students was a paper we had to write on incunabula. And that's the way the University of California Library found its incunabula, by having library school students running barefoot through the stacks, trying to figure out whether or not this was the one book we could write a report on. I think they've finally got them all now. I went to library school a number of years ago. Yes, ma'am.
I just recently started a job where it's very monotonous, and so I've been listening to books on tape while I do my work. And I was wondering how you make the choices for the books on tape and what can be done to extend that.
Good question. Books on tape are extremely popular. Ann?
Okay, the branches just have abridged books on tape for the most part. The main library has both unabridged and abridged books on tape. I would love to have unabridged books on tape in the branches, but they're extremely expensive. One unabridged book set will cost $65, $75, $85 per set. And when the branch people have been resistant on this, so I have been working on them, and I was hoping this year that we'd get more unabridged into the branches, but I don't think there's enough money to do that. I happen to be a book on tape addict myself. I have listened to almost every one the main library owns, so I keep pushing. The main library, for those of you who do use the main library, you wouldn't know that they have a big collection because they're always out, but they also have just recently ordered a lot, which they hadn't done in a while. So I'd say in 2 or 3 months, if you come in, you might find some new ones. And the branches order every month. They have a list of probably 20 or 25 titles that they can select from, and they do. And in those sort of go out to the branches. Do you go to a branch or the main too? Both, yeah. The problem at the main is that they are so popular that often there's very little there. I know that. And hopefully in time, there'll be more. I want more.
Terry, do you want to?
I'm working, I can't be reading a book in the same. Yeah, I really do think libraries will more and more have more and more books on tape, because I think once people start listening, it's a wonderful way to absorb books if you don't have a lot of time. And I listen to them in my car. And I hope, frankly, that in the future the library will commit more money in that direction. Not half its budget, but, more.
Terry, did you want to comment from the branch?
I just wanted to say that one of the things we do at Excelsior is after we have ordered from the list, we keep a copy for patrons to look to see what we did order. One of the good things about books on tape more recently is that publishers are getting it finally. Yeah. They're coming out with the book on tape at the same time that the book is out. They're also coming out with paperbacks at the same time that the hardcover. So we're having more opportunity to order them. Branches, however, of course, as I mentioned, are limited with funds. But it's a good trend that publishers are finally getting it, and they're putting out the books on tape at the same time that the hardcover is coming out.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Good. I have a question, please. I am so glad to be here with this nice group about books, book lovers, as we are. I am wondering why some good writers, they go out of print. You know, knowledge is power. They might be helpful to a lot of young people today. The generation might be better off than. This book was written 1905. The author talk about self-help, character, power, etc., etc. Put great example like President Abraham Lincoln, general, etc., etc. I am wondering why the book out of print.
Why do books go out of print? Books go out of print because people are not willing to buy them. Books go out of print in some cases because the print run is too short. Books go out of print because they're not accessible to very many people. Sometimes there's only a very short publication run, particularly of a first novel. 5,000 run printing of a first novel is a lot for a first novel. That's correct. It's a 1905 title. It might be a wonderful book. It might be the best book that you've read in many, many years. It probably went out of print because there wasn't the market for it. Publishing business is a business. They're in business to make money. They're in business to sell books. It's a slightly different business than we are in. We're in the business of making information available to people. Getting a book back in print is a very arduous and tedious task. It is not even always possible. But Anne, you might want to respond also. Why things go out of print?
If you read the publishing literature, there's just constant talk about the fact that it's a business. Publishing is a business, and publishers, I can't really explain it to you, but there's something about the tax law that.
Oh, it's an inventory.
Yeah.
It's an inventory situation, and they are taxed on inventory. If you're a vendor, I think we have a vendor in the audience who probably understands that better than we do, but I believe they're taxed on their inventory at a certain time of the year.
Right.
And sometimes things, not only do they get remainder, they get ground up.
But might give you a little hope to know that there's a woman, Sheila Goldmacher, who's a librarian who works with me, and Sheila's a very feisty and outspoken person, and when she finds a book, or we find a book that's out of print that we think should be in print, we call up the publisher and we tell them that it should be in print. And in one or two cases, I think it's actually influenced. Recently we pointed out to a publisher that Amelia Earhart had gotten a lot of publicity recently, and we were getting requests for books about her. And their book had gone, was not available. And I think they may have reprinted, or, that probably wouldn't be the case in most cases. But just so you know that librarians once in a while do a little lobbying.
Can be proactive as well. Grace, what about children's books?
I wanted to add that the Association for Library Service for Children of the American Library Association has a committee that surveys librarians across the country and says, hey, what books do you think should be back in print that aren't in print? And they present that list to the publishers on a regular basis, and as a result, a number of things have been coming back into print. But definitely the bottom line is the company making money. And I just heard recently at a conference I attended that the editors, when they get a new manuscript that they think is good, they can't just say, wow, this is great, I'm going to publish it. They have to meet with their salespeople, their marketing people, and write up a business sheet for the book. And if it doesn't look on paper like they will make money off that book, they don't publish it.
Comments from any of the other panelists on this one? Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir, as you come down.
Hi, I'd like to know if there is a program by which the library acquires the books of local San Francisco writers, and also can an author request that their book be acquired by the library? Thank you.
The answer to your second question is yes. The answer to your first question, Anne.
Is yes. We're always, we make a special point of looking for local authors all the time. I mean, we, in every way we can, we become familiar with local authors' names, and so we watch out when books by them are being published. But like at the book fair, I went around at the book fair this fall, and there were a number, of locally published things that I was taking notes about. A lot of people call us up. Frequently, the authors will just call me up and say, please, would you, buy my book, or can I send you a copy, or whatever. So we are always trying to do that.
Yes, it's
Make an
not
effort.
unusual for an author to send,
Yeah.
particularly a local author, to send their local library a copy of the book and also request that they buy more copies to have at the branch libraries, and we consider them just as we consider any other purchase.
For an adult book,
For an,
to me, is Anne Roughton, Roughton.
and she's Anne is the material selection manager just here at the main library, and it will get to her. Mhm. Any other comments,
I
Terry?
just wanted to say that authors have come to me when I've been on the reference desk, and in fact, one author had jewelry and kind of gem books, a whole wonderful series of them that she brought in and showed me, and I made sure they had their little international standard book number and sent off the slips. So, it happens, and we encourage it.
And one of the things that is very important to do is to read the local press, because not often, but yes, often I would say a local author won't necessarily get reviewed nationally. I mean, many do, but many don't. So it's important to read the local press and the local reviews, and to look at who's doing book signings and things like that, who's talking, just to become familiar with who is writing books.
Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you. I actually have a follow-up question on the last one, and that was, you've mentioned a couple of the sources of the reviews that you look at. So I'm wondering which ones you do specifically look at, whether you favor one list over another, and if so, why?
I think that will go both to Anne and Terry and Grace. So,
Everybody.
Terry, you want to start on that one?
Yes, one of the things I do, especially with the non-popular or the nonfiction, is I just do a general search, a book review search in our magazine index, and I'll look at reviews on science things from Popular Science or astronomy, and so where I feel like some of what I call trade journals may not carry some of this, then I read the reviews in the trade journals of the subject that I'm looking for. So that's one of the ways I expand from just reading library journal, book list, that kind of thing.
Ed, do you have a response to that?
Yes, my process is pretty much the same. I read American Journal, American Book List, Library Journal, citations and reviews, and they appear on my desk periodically on a regular interval. I go through them, review them. If I see something that fits within the jobs and careers area, then I order it. But the thing I think about before I order it, do I already have this? Do I have something that does this better? Is the cost prohibitive? Okay, and so I use every review that I can get my hands on, because it gives me another option. But in addition to that, when I'm away from the library, sometimes on my own time, I will visit something like Super Crowns or Barnes & Nobles or whomever, and just go through their collection and see if they have something that I haven't seen in books or print or wherever. And so for me, just, I can't get enough of reviews.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say going to conferences, I go to the American Library Association conferences, and they have a notable children's book committee, as well as young adult notables and adult notables, and so you listen to people from around the country discussing the better books, and that's one way of checking, what we have against what is being spoken about, or the better books of the year for children's.
Anne?
Was your question more which review sources or what are the better ones? Well, I have a lot to do with creating the list that the branches order from. So we use PW, Library Journal, New York Times Book Review, San Francisco Cron Review. I'm forgetting what book list. But we also just use, I use everything. And I will use publishers' catalogs. I go through literally hundreds of publishers' catalogs a year. I don't take a lot of time. I scan them. I know what I'm looking for. And some things will go on without a review. Also, this is one place that going to the bookstores will even back up a review. Sometimes it's, even if you have a review, seeing the book will really reinforce or negatively reinforce, what the review said. So we just a very wide source, but the main library people use specialized sources. The art department is using art sources, and humanities or general collections is using specialized sources because they're ordering more specialized materials. They use journals, they use a lot of different things. They use vendor catalogs to some extent. So there's no one. I think it really depends which area you're ordering in.
Well, with the need we have to order pre-pub, in other words, in advance of publication, most of the sources that we will be using are the Library Journal, which is mostly pre-publication. Publishers Weekly, as Anne mentioned, gives you a fall, a spring, and a summer list, which forecasts things for you. And you can usually get a sense, because if you take a look at Publishers Weekly in its spring or winter, the two major announcement issues that they have, they also give you the advertising budget. And they also tell you whether or not the author's going to travel. And they tell you whether if the author does Oprah or does the big three, Oprah, Letterman, not so much Rosie O'Donnell, but Leno.
It's Oprah.
But it's Oprah. Oprah has very big feet. She really has made and I, for one, frankly, applaud the fact that she is bringing out material to people that they would not normally see. But because we need to order in advance of publication so that we can get the books on the shelves as quickly as possible, for the popular material, we are relying on advance reviews. And those are not necessarily the ones that you'll see published, although the Chronicle's pretty good in getting a review done pretty much on pub date. But generally speaking, I think I should be able to go on Monday morning and look in the catalog and find the books that are reviewed in the Chronicle Sunday on order, if they're really popular titles. I don't want to put Ann on the spot, really. But I have checked this out, and we don't do too badly. It's one of my ways of making sure things are happening. I can take one more question before we have to wrap up this evening, if we have one more. The book budget is never adequate.
Never.
There doesn't seem to be anyone here particularly focused on literature and the humanities and the older books in our collection, especially the main library. And so my question would have to do with what kind of pressures exist to withdraw from the collection older books, perhaps like the one this gentleman was talking about, that is out of print, first edition, older book, treasured by him, difficult to replace, not going to get published. In other words, how does the libraries function as a place to preserve our older books and our heritage work? Some particular questions that came to my mind as you described the process was, in the branches, my question was whether all books taken out of the branches were checked for last copies, either in another branch
Yes, they are.
or at the main.
Yes.
And so then if it's determined that that book is a last copy, I would wonder what action would be taken on that.
If it is determined, can we answer your questions as you go along rather than waiting
Well,
until
if
the
you're
end?
going to let me continue the
Well,
questions, yeah.
excuse me, but I thought that was a question. What happens to the book when it comes to the main library from a branch? Is that a question? Okay, let's answer that one, because it gets a little complicated, and I don't want to forget them. So basically speaking, if I understand it, if a book is no longer needed at a branch library, it is weeded. It is sent to the main library. It is checked to see if it is the last copy. If it is the last copy, then, Ann?
Well, the branch is supposed to check to find out if it's the last copy. If it's the last copy or even the second to the last copy, they send it to the selector in the main who selects in that area. I mean, if it's a fiction title, they send it to the fiction selectors, and if it's a costume book, they send it to the costume book selector, and those the selector then makes a determination whether or not to keep it. And we recently have been doing training on collection maintenance and weeding, and I feel that one of the really good things that has come out of that is a real, well, I would say just enhanced knowledge and reminder to all of the librarians about looking for the older books that do have value, or that, and to send them to the main or to send them to special collections.
We have time for one more question before I have to clear the room.
So
one more, please.
I understand, as you said at the beginning, that 176,000 books had been ordered this past year, which suggests to me that unless there has been an expansion of bookshelf space that has been available, that 176,000 books have had to leave the collection. And
No, I don't think that's true.
well, that's good. And then I wonder if a record is kept of all of the last copies of books that are removed from the collection, so that we will know as a historical record or as a possible way to replace those books in the future when the opportunity would come or the request would come to, so that we would know what books they were that were in the collection that are now no longer in the collection.
Ann, do we have such a record? I don't believe
No,
that the system permits that.
No.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, the answer is
But
no.
also remember, those books are available through interlibrary loan.
Yeah.
They aren't lost forever.
And
my
remember that
concern
even
is
the
that-
Library of Congress discards books.
Yes, but my concern is that this society is under a lot of pressure in all its libraries in terms of keeping its books, and that we should do all that we can to keep our books.
Thank you. Thank all of you for coming this evening. We appreciate your participation. I'd like to recognize Kathy Page, who put this program together for us this evening. And we hope that you'll continue to use the library profitably, and we hope that we have given you a little bit of an insight as to the nuts and bolts as to how the library works. Thank you and good evening.